Doubtful is that coming from every direction, north, east, south, west, that their brakes decidedly on the same interval of second opted to fail them, or that contrarily that it was pedal to the metal, full cylinder ahead. It was also beyond doubt that the multiple fires igniting from explosion could be tended to by emergency response vehicles. Matter of fact, amid one of the pileups in a large, candy apple red vehicle with considerable reflection of glimmer from sunlight flecks flickering on chrome fittings and hardware, was one of the vehicles hosting the largest of all explosions with the otherwise life-saving fire trucks. These were only vehicles on the ground in the largest display of synchronized crash car since the smash-up derby. "You're not coming with me. You're not coming along," the man before plummeting over the drawbridge wearing his panic-like anger shouted, and onto a lower underpass in kamikaze-style nosedive slammed through the gate barring several feet ahead on his riverside edge of the drawbridge. Remarkably having the presence of mind to swoop into the driver's seat as if recently reading a guidebook titled How to Commandeer Vehicles in Driver-Vacated Cars. It was conceivable that this man had all of next year's crisis management maneuvers ready at hand's command. They'd left home in their vehicles as a party of four, almost arrived at destination as a trio. Unlikely that the car would most certainly be by even the most discriminant partial colored attendee's eye in vicinity discern make and model and VIN details and features. Slam then slam again, then into these collisions on large highway stretches rows of pileups did form. As we've seen in the air, the military jets en route for their respective bases or areas of engagement throttled to point of obeying gravity laws, so too do we see in large Airbuses materializing on this scene the one commercial airliner that only 1,000 feet from the drawbridge. Zoom! Collided into corrugated junk material as her engine on full throttle, scarcely meant to drastically cut against momentum like this, made for its ghastly premature, redesigned flight destination. Some of these persons to live out the tragedy after. With a tremendous boom crashing with remorseless non-stealth and hydroplaning on the overhead stone of that double entry or exit tunnel now barricaded by raging fire at each smoking nostrils. The smell of rubber on fire and fuel stench everywhere as several passengers as quickly as they could at this intersection a grim and unsuspected death shuttled off to hospitals within the hour, 2 persons in the commercial bus going into cardiac arrest before the pilot in command with his co-pilot on an unscheduled restroom break. On this most peculiar exit and method of departure was 30% of those names paying for tickets with window and aisle seats. On the very same moment that the fighter jets had become high-priced gliders, several other events on the ground outside on this site take place. Both the single-manned wrecking machine and ground excavating crane. At the construction site to answer the bell for lunch, all somewhat prematurely, as through a high-rise office window went the cement-obliterating wrecking ball before the tractor tipped over, while the groaning truck with a peaceless appetite for old ground and stone did over an embankment chug along before disappearing from tank-like tractor tread to the metal-toothed bucket. Hard-hatted men and women in yellow and orange vests, and in some instances beyond revivable wits, who'd either mindlessly mutter to themselves or become stymied on total speechlessness and stupefying suspense. Several a foreman and co-worker fixing on only one incident of the several surrounding. At a nearby theological university on top of emblazoned valleys, tunnels, considerable acreage now serving as grounds for several a skyscraper and business district, the unthinkable question. Before this woman could walk on over to her windows to derive a clue to her question's answer, she asked while shaking that pointer stick edge toward the head of her class, and then switched to indicate a graph against the screen image transparency reflection, touching against a self-drawn pictograph. Now who has a mind, given these solid proofs, to trust in anything but a pre-tribulation rapture as do I and most of us? She'd stay on to answer, in time, her own question here. Truth is, in one day, the day of this worldwide catastrophe, she would study the matter with more desperate earnest than had she in the previous 10 years. Only starting from a different premise once unthinkable or most unpleasing to her. Answering empirically now as could 100% of her class answer affirmatively. Half of that percentage could do so from the seminary or in their homes, whereas the others could answer in the company of the very instructor of all instructors as the very first one to teach on the subject, as sure as could the disciple Paul teach first on what was up for discussion this same day in same classroom in subject heading imminency. An orderly God habitually lining up events according to a chronology, and an erudite Paul speaking the words that only agreed with them pertaining to sequence of 70th week events. Outside of the institute sounded more of screeching crash car derby, while inside linoleum floor buffer and fax and copier machines were left to run themselves with lock engaged on one and multi-run feed on the others. Early summer break had come for this academic season. Boats AS answer on the river and heading for dock, with obstinate and finicky newsfeed signals telecast the tragedies wherever primetime profit global time had left off in its preempting. "Look, Mama. Papa," the 4-year-old boy challenging the strength and elasticity of his seatbelts as he throttled about, pointing excitedly as the first person in the car to get the news. The zoo's open. The zoo announcing its Bring Your Undomesticated Animals to the City Day, when a grizzly was seen covering quite the distance, as had banshee squirrel monkeys made way for the streets to bounce atop roofs of idling and abandoned cars. It must have been feeding time also for the lion, as the jungle beast was seen traipsing majestically alongside the highway, growling and as though with oscillating head canting his head into half-circle kink-defying rolls while angrily staring down encased persons as if they'd been trespassing on his terrain. Yes, theories purporting that animals go to heaven from well-meaning folk, they'd have to answer for why these hadn't made today's roster. They made it out alive and only hurt the grizzly as they pull away and off of him, the bear having hammered his paw into the partially open window, the broken glass sending Johnny into hysterics back there. And then a sight just as horrible when a baby stroller steamrolled for the intersection and had straightway crashed in dreadful slow-motion heart-stopping anticipation, resisting a natural conclusion with its upended rolling wheels as only resolve. The scrambling men and women running parallel to ground and tripping with hockey skates on, as 'twere. Feet over feet dashing it up street, it seemed that everybody had a breath-robbing mind-reeling moment to point out the baby stroller. Gasping or into mummified stillness and comatose, darn near, while staring and pointing and making subconscious half-steps toward the intersection or in throttling hysterics looking away to avoid, from one corner to the other, the sight in what bounce and rock and just miss careening into a gas station's pumps. Riding on two wheels only while picking up speed and into indefinable metal junkworks like a freight train storming on a lightning strike and only cradled by the thick wheels of two 18-wheeler transport trucks. Each with emptying contents, spewing flames and spitting fuel alongside slamming grids, screaming forth specks of mirroring sunshine glints that blinded, with radiators bellowing under siege of testifying constraints of combustible pressure. The horns largely dominating the raptastrophic blaring debacle of cacophonous interlude here and that which antithetically only oppose it. Of the many onlookers, only a few could with an amazing presence of mind focus amid the multitudinous tragedies on a detail to any isolated crash-up and explosion here. These same nail-biting few comforted when telling others that the infant stroller had only been filled with blue blankets, sheet, pillow and toys. About the Boeing 747 nose diving into the side of the mountain across from these tunnels, these could speak only generically without specifics if they stirred from their stupors at all. Another marvel, perfectly and not coincidentally occurring scarcely on the heels of but during the very time of a certain transpiration, unlike the random missile, as frequently discharged whirled around as they were, or the rocket fire from tanks and various plague intrigues, it wouldn't be exaggerating to say that of the very molecular form of transpiration in this event. 'Twas finally as if some inexplicable device had had its hand on the trigger all along to for the entire world fire this one round with beyond remarkable accuracy, impacting with remarkable accuracy only as a discharge engaged for the express purpose of saving a people. This is unthinkable. Without so much resistance in flight and from the ground now this, whatever it is. Our engines are failing. Are we out of fuel? The MiG fighter jet pilot shrieked before learning quickly that the needles to his very meters created to reveal his fuel level point and maddeningly bounced to and from Z. Learning of something just as unexpected when radio distress signals hearing was limited to an audience of two in these who were men in a flying coffin instead of aircraft. And do you see that? What in Sam Hal is that? Exclaimed the rear pilot, pointing as though hostile over the shoulder of his mate manning the front gears, his forearm miraculously still connected to the rest of his arm. I don't know, the pilot responded, eerily composed only in so much that was he in a state of peaked flabbergast, gazing toward his right side to take a quick gander and readily noticing them too. Odd lights mysteriously like those seen before they become entangled in quagmire in something experienced by even NASA as only minutes before had she mysteriously been heard radioing in on what would turn out to be a final signal transmission sent back to Earth. I suddenly have to learn how to fly a billion-dollar glider is what I do know. I can park her on the tip of a needle unless of course we've been irreparably impacted. You smell anything? Bad weather forecast only metaphorically on tap for persons inside of military tanks and otherwise engaged in combat as inclement weather wasn't otherwise on tap. Holy God! Who's firing? The co-pilot, stilled in stupefied and stammering unchaste bewilderment and maybe unaware of his vocal tone of hilarity that was accentuated by shrapnel and glass shards, in roundabout way thought the pilot, the former beginning to feel for a pulse to his audio faculty while attempting to gather himself after the pilot share his thought, only hearing guttural noises from the front when rear attempt to speak. I don't know. I think. The pilot lowered elevation on a zigzag trajectory, flanking out wider on his left side before on seesaw pattern coasting. Careful with that. I don't think they, whoever the hell, are firing on us. Even without the meters we'd know. Yeah, just like the radios and engine they gauge as a shot, mate. We can't know anything for sure until we know. We're being attacked but are strangely not being overtaken, like we're in taxi mode without a lead. Overtaken by what? A freaking light show? They'd almost seem to have real bodies, sorta. I don't know. I'm hard-winging us down rough on your left guard in jet-turned glider, so I'm focusing right and as high up as I can 45 her, nose to kiss sky. 10 to 12 with audible for 4 is your only meter back there. We're caught in a foggy but light mist as you see. Tell me what you see seeing shooting upward when I level her. I'm shaking us out of this. I'll take perspective upward down in so much that I can. The pilot when failing to get a response, roger me on all this, okay? The bodies of light trajectory before making like a tourniquet cradling them in intervals of stages continuing to launch up high and well beyond them, at speed of water jettisoning angrily from S-picket downward to impact basin. Only their lateral encroaching on the pilots horizontally suddenly feel like sharks on design and from the different directions honing in on prey, as if either reluctant or intentionally threatening as they seem to take inventory of the jet before hazing in closer. I'm here. Yeah, roger and waiting. The pilot gave an overhead signal and began, 4, 3, 2 and, as coolly as could one say it nonchalantly he said while elongating the simple one syllable, 1. The bodies in collusion did coalesce and become one large milky haze of quagmire, immersed so deep in her that seeing through the glass would require technology not available on the moment to enable them to penetrate. Several long seconds passed. What did you see on the maneuver? Number? Frequency? Damn, you mean what did I not see? For instance, all I could then see, God's sakes, was these cones of that white light shooting skyward still, almost in rank file. Seems to have body form only with something like a waterfall passing through, As good a description as any, I guess. They continue skyward without a discernible cessation of skyward trajectory. Yeah, well not just shooting skyward at us but everywhere as before they'd closed in or it seemed to flash like a camera's flash. Blinding lights if all that was honing in and around. If the body hems us in like a tourniquet you'll struggle to see through the shield anyway. What was from your vantage point? Mate, I similarly saw them shooting skyward. Kinda reminds me of those Dr. Cosmos or Living Breathing Galaxy shows when odd flashes flitted around up there with lights borealis displays, or whatever. Instead of shooting it I saw these as like lightning bolts only flashing from Earth. More of the prophet's intrigues, maybe. Whether you consider the two as true, Eleazar Elias and Moshe, whatever, or if you think that's of Piotradanis, whatever he's called. I don't care what you call 'em. I call crazy as fire-breathing dragons in adults' books. Ha! God's grandstanders, only one of the two men ever seeming to procure favor so ardently from us, the entire world whereas the prophets, to say they shoot blatantly and from the hip is an understatement of understatements. But maybe you're right. They've been calling, or at least Pieta's diplomat prince from Syria gone evil in the temple and elsewhere, lauding him as is said to have called fire down from heaven instead of a star show sent from earth skyward like this. Said to have the power to muzzle the earthquakes even. Gee whiz. To which co-pilot mate said, in a sample bite culture with adaptations of virtual reality in mainstream, taking over everything, it's hard to know what's really occurring anymore even after you see it on the screens. I doubt this out there is his, NASA's, work though. Warmongers who've jacked our planet up. How many deaths are they responsible for in these wars? God only knows. I think that. Woo-ah, couldn't get any closer. Than that, he's got his engine about him still. We roar like that? Just got my ears lowered. If I wasn't strapped down in my bucket seat I think I would have crashed through the roof. Ours? Again, mate, limited to what we see. You weren't able to detect here either. Damn, bro, those lights out there are blinders. Look how they mirror the sun. She sounded like ours though, didn't she? I don't know but I think she's air taxiing back, or is en route. I ain't tacking my eyes, ears, rather, off her. Any friends on the other side, I wonder? Ahead and near? Mate's only response was, ah. Another one. Or the same, wearing her like a ball cap. Right from behind. That's two. Holy. Gabrielle for a few sections suddenly gliding on the emissions jet streaming from the tail end of the plane in lead, Russian, mate. Ain't ever seen something so humongous and so damn quiet, comparatively. She ain't stealth though. Russian, you say? As in Vladimir Kremlin kids? Yep. Drago jets, sickle, hammer, and star. What's more she, and confound me already, didn't visit the deli on us. Swiss cheese us. Lose your engine, lose your guns, you have to preserve to maintain. She's still a weapon as are we. Either didn't see us as we can't or peepers were on us for sure. Listen, before a third one comes and decides to get more intimate with us I'm ripping us hard now steep up again and then to roll over. I think she might be toying with us. Thank God. Easy goes it though. I have a family back there still struggling on page 1 of the beginner's guide titled COHABITATING in an apocalyptic world. Planes whose pilots over oceans, unable to radio or to receive or to even turn transmission, believed under the chaotic turn of events when losing all of vehicle and highway that they were suddenly inauspiciously vulnerable to heinous work of nature, man or God. Similarly with the most sincere form of regard for the light show blitzkrieg intrigued for so long but unable to express any appreciation for such unidentifiable things that were only presumed as friend because the proclivity to believe that not all resistance could be declared as foe, wargame ideology had to wrangle with whimsical psychology. Well these were overwhelmed by what pressed in on them while fearing depressurizing and many, each in their own turn, displayed that they'd lost all hope when at least 2 planes before inspiring another suddenly ascribed to the school of kamikaze warfare method to remedially address all harms. What secret thing did they invent down there? In Russian a Russian pilot this time asking his ride along, something that is capable of without taking the shot at us mangle engines like so as ours suddenly turns to sputtering? And the other jets similarly? I cannot gun on what I don't have in my scope. I think I grazed USA back there though. He was soon met by 2 American planes who would with the fog lifting and light show thinning out some sandwich in and top and bottom her, with ample space between them. Then on a semicircular pattern while the Russian aimed his plane at the US Navy ship down below similarly on glide mode as he make his descent after covering 1/2 the distance before the American upon became perilously impacted and ejected the plane. Down below and behind while parachuting toward the sea, he strained to take a gander and then watched as the winged man torpedo and turn into a grand display of pyrotechnics marvel. Fire blossoming wide and high and shrapnel splinter everywhere upon impact with the Navy carrier. Lighting up far and wide from point of impact and to the clear unseen side of the ship, sending skittering fire sparks where skedaddling deckhands who seemed to simultaneously take for cover and moved in toward the crash, both maddeningly zipped about in compliance with perfect manual worthy order and crisis management etiquette, and those who conversely on shorn senses in disrepair prepare in the least as scurrying deckhands in every which direction darted about. The silent plane, the screaming missile and lack of radio was a perceived conundrum unto prophecy overhead well before the fresh debris of fire as decorative but unsolicited junkworks a mangle blossomed into what justified concerns. She did clearly see what we were up to by successfully distracting her. Later from aboard the same ship after amid firesparks landing on only her belly, there said one American to his co-pilot, "Or the gunners elsewise would have taken the shot. Why didn't she attempt to shoot them down before seeing us far off?" To which the pilot smartly said, "You mean like I did?" Her guns were gone before ours were, I think. As was her engine and the rest gone. She'd grazed them accidentally and then they moved in and sandwiched her and snapped off her tail and she lost her mechanics. I have some of it on tape. They created the stuff that's jamming even them up. This pilot had stressed before, adding, "It's the Confederacy of Nations you guys say we prat on and are disillusioned about. They are united in attempt to take over the bloody world. You still think the Antichrist talk is fairy tale? Something, what's left of it, you mean? No. I think you guys were onto something. That was then, nothing else makes sense. Men on detail everywhere no longer wishing to serve as mobile petroleum receptacle drums with wings or rudder and anchor, although it wasn't at the respective homes they were glad to finally accomplish their landing in various regions of the world. They'd lost 100% of their munitions and communications and at least as much of their stoical and indispensable good morale. What they'd also lost was their desire to discuss what kind of technical difficulties they'd been subjected to when learning after landing that of the several planes manned with double teams, in several an instance with two fighters taking off. Only one had climbed out of the plane to greet the others landing on the makeshift runway, and, in many an instance, planes without being shot at. They never landed at all and coursed through sky until running out of gasoline or wherever weaponry did function were shot down. Their radios not to planes but inside of the fighter pilots that still functioned. They were manned from some otherworldly place.
It's Eli James. Production is titled 70. It's something I'm calling Raptastrophes. From part 4B of 70, the 5-part section, or 5-part story. Look for it soon in ebook, paperback, audiobook, and hardcover. And that's it. Today's date is December 20th, 2024.